Sad smile. Because humans know what it feels like to be abandoned. They know what it's like to stand alone, with no one to call for help. That same night, the Verelians sent out a final plea, directed not to the other species of the galaxy but to humanity. A desperate call for aid, without promise of reward or favor, a plea for survival. Days passed in tense silence. The Crackseal pressed their assault, each attack drawing closer to the capital, and the Verelians prepared for the inevitable end. Then, just as hope was about to flicker out for good, the response came, not words, but action. It began with a low rumble, a vibration that echoed through the ground and sky. Alarin looked up, her heart skipping a beat as massive human warships pierced the atmosphere, their dark hulls gleaming like predators from the void. Engines roared, and drop pods rained down, slamming into the ground like falling stars. The humans had arrived. Alarin watched, both terrified and awestruck, as human soldiers marched from the pods with precise, deadly efficiency. They were armored head to toe in advanced exosuits, weapons gleaming in their hands. They moved without hesitation, forming defensive lines with terrifying speed, their commanders barking orders that echoed through the smoky air. The Crackseal forces attacked within minutes, a swarm of armored beasts and heavily armed warriors charging toward the newly landed humans. The Verelians watched from the safety of the ruins, their hearts pounding in their chests. The humans did not flinch. They met the Crackseal with a ferocity that stunned even their enemies. Weapons hummed, plasma bolts flew, and the ground shook under the force of human artillery. The Crackseal, so used to easy victories, found themselves outmatched at every turn. Alarin stood frozen as she witnessed the battle unfold. She had never seen anything like it. The humans fought as if each moment were their last, striking with ruthless precision and overwhelming the enemy through sheer force of will. Every Crackseal soldier who dared approach the human lines was cut down without mercy, and yet there was no joy in the humans' actions, no battle cries or shouts of triumph. They fought not for glory, but for survival. Within hours, the tide of the battle had turned. The Crackseal retreated, leaving the Verelians stunned and breathless in the aftermath. The humans did not celebrate their victory. They regrouped, reinforcing their lines and tending to their wounded. Their grim determination remained, as if the battle had not ended but merely shifted into its next phase. Alarin watched them, her heart conflicted. These humans, whom she had feared as merciless warriors, were different from what she expected. They were terrifying in battle, ruthless and efficient, but there was something deeper beneath their cold exteriors, something she couldn't yet understand. The Verelian Council approached the human commander cautiously, unsure how to express their gratitude. The commander, Major Cole, stood at the center of his soldiers, his expression calm and unreadable beneath his helmet. "We thank you," one counselor said hesitantly. "You saved us when no one else would." Major Cole nodded once. "We're not done yet. This isn't over." With that, he turned back toward the battlefield, preparing for the next assault. There was no demand for payment, no hint of arrogance. The humans had come to fight, and fight they would, until the job was finished. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Alarin stood among her people, watching the human soldiers move with quiet efficiency. They were not what she expected. They weren't conquerors, and they weren't mercenaries. They fought as if the Verelians' survival mattered to them, not for power or wealth, but for a reason she couldn't yet grasp. And as she looked into the eyes of the human soldiers tending to their wounded comrades, Alarin felt the first flicker of hope since the invasion began. The humans had come, and they were not leaving until the fight was won. The next dawn broke over the battered Verelian capital, painting the sky in soft pink and orange hues. But the beauty of the sunrise did nothing to calm the tension that gripped the people below. The humans had arrived, and their presence loomed over everything like an unstoppable force. Alarin stood with a group of Verelians on the highest intact terrace, watching as massive human warships hovered silently above their world. Their dark hulls, sleek and intimidating, cast long shadows over the landscape, engines glowing with restrained energy. It was as if the ships themselves held back from unleashing their full power. "Barely. They look like predators," an elder whispered beside her, eyes wide with fear. Alarin couldn't argue. The humans' warships gave off an aura of calculated menace, yet she noticed something strange in the way they had arrived. No grand display, no intimidation for its own sake. The humans were here to fight, not to show off. Before long, dropships detached from the motherships, descending to the surface like a storm of metal. The ground trembled as hundreds of soldiers deployed, forming into precise formations. They wasted no time. Weapons drawn, scanners activated, and patrols sweeping the ruins with disciplined efficiency. From her perch, Alarin observed their movements. Every step, every command was cold and deliberate. They didn't stop to admire the scenery or assess the damage. They worked like beings with one purpose: victory. Down in the ruins, the first meeting between the Verelians and humans unfolded in an awkward exchange. Major Cole, a tall figure encased in armor that reflected no light, stepped forward to meet the Verelian counselors. His visor stayed down, concealing his expression, and his voice was flat as he introduced himself. "Major Cole, Earth Defense Corps," he said. "We'll contain the threat and push the Kraxel back. Keep your people out of the way." A startled silence followed his words. The Verelian counselors exchanged nervous glances, unsure how to respond to the curt greeting. Alarin stepped forward hesitantly, antennae twitching. "Will you be able to hold them off?" she asked, trying to suppress the tremor in her voice. Major Cole's helmet tilted slightly as he regarded her. "We'll do more than that," he replied. "We'll end it." There was no arrogance in his words, just a grim certainty that unsettled her even more than boasting would have. When the next Kraxel assault came, the humans were ready. The battle began suddenly. An explosion rocked the eastern quarter of the city, followed by the deafening roar of the Kraxel forces advancing. Hundreds of enemy soldiers, clad in jagged armor and wielding brutal energy weapons, stormed toward the Verelian capital with terrifying speed. The humans didn't flinch. They met the enemy with the same cold precision that marked their every action. Plasma bolts and railgun fire streaked across the battlefield, cutting through Kraxil warriors with ruthless efficiency. Drones swept over the battlefield, relaying information to commanders in real time. Alarin watched in stunned disbelief as the humans coordinated their attacks with terrifying precision. Every shot, every step was calculated. The humans weren't just fighting, they were hunting, dismantling the Kraxil's formations piece by piece. And the Kraxil, who had expected another easy conquest, reeled under the assault. For the first time, the invaders hesitated. They weren't prepared for an enemy that fought back without fear. Alarin couldn't look away as human medics dragged wounded soldiers from the battlefield, patching them up with rapid efficiency before sending them back into the fight. She noticed how the humans protected the civilians, forming shields around clusters of terrified Verelians, even as enemy fire rained down. One moment burned itself into her memory. A Kraxil warrior broke through the lines, charging toward a group of cowering Verelian children. Before Alarin could react, a human soldier threw himself in front of the attack. The soldier took the full force of the enemy's weapon, his armor cracking under the impact. But he didn't fall. With a snarl, he raised his rifle and cut down the Kraxil attacker, shielding the children with his body until the danger passed. Alarin's breath caught in her throat. The soldier turned to the children, his voice calm and steady beneath his cracked helmet. "You're safe now," he said, before moving back into the fight. By nightfall, the Kraxil had been driven from the city. Fires still burned in the ruins, and the air smelled of ash and metal. But the Verelians were alive, and, for the first time in days, free from the threat of immediate annihilation. Alarin stood at the edge of the battlefield, watching as human soldiers gathered their wounded and collected their dead. There was no celebration among them, no shouts of victory. The humans moved with quiet efficiency, as if the battle had been nothing more than another task, something to be done and moved on from. She couldn't understand it. How could they fight with such ferocity, yet show so little emotion? Were they truly as cold as the story suggested? She watched as Major Cole knelt beside a fallen soldier, placing a hand on the man's chest. There was a moment of silence, a brief, solemn pause before the body was carried away. It was the only hint of emotion she had seen from the humans, and it left her more confused than ever. That evening, Alarin approached Major Cole again. She found him standing alone near the human command post, gazing at the ruins in silence. For the first time, his helmet was off, revealing a face lined with exhaustion and something else, something she couldn't quite place. "Thank you," she said quietly, not knowing what else to say. Cole gave a tired nod but said nothing. "Why did you come?" Alarin asked, unable to suppress the question any longer. "You didn't ask for anything in return. You fought so relentlessly. I don't understand why." For a moment, Cole didn't respond. He seemed to weigh her question carefully, as if deciding how much to reveal. "We came because we know what it's like," he said finally, his voice low and rough. "We've been where you are, alone, desperate, facing an enemy that doesn't care if you live or die." Alarin blinked, surprised by the raw honesty in his words. There was no bravado, No trace of superiority, just a quiet, painful truth. Cole glanced toward the horizon, where the distant glow of fires still flickered. "We fight because no one fought for us when we needed it," he said. "So now, we fight for those who can't fight for themselves." Alarin stared at him, stunned into silence. This was not the answer she had expected. She had thought the humans fought out of anger, or bloodlust, or some need for conquest. But instead they fought because they understood, because they knew what it felt like to stand on the brink of annihilation and have no one answer the call for help. For the first time, she began to see the humans not as monsters, but as something far more complicated and far more human. The Craxil learned quickly. Humanity was unlike any enemy they had ever faced. Each encounter with the human forces was a lesson in futility, one they learned at the cost of thousands of lives. The humans fought with precision and brutality, turning every battlefield into a trap. As the humans pushed deeper into Verelian territory, the Craxil's confidence crumbled. Their attempts to regroup were met with devastating ambushes, their reinforcements intercepted before they even reached the surface. Human ships cut through enemy fleets like blades through water, while ground forces advanced without hesitation, tearing apart Craxil strongholds. Alarin and a few Verelian civilians observed from the shelter of a crumbling structure, watching in awe as human soldiers coordinated a flawless assault on an enemy outpost. The soldiers moved in perfect sync, each covering the other, never leaving a comrade behind. Heavy artillery fire shook the ground, while drones hovered overhead, feeding real-time data to the soldiers below. Within minutes, the outpost was reduced to rubble, with the Craxil survivors either captured or eliminated. Alarin marveled at the sheer efficiency of it. There was no hesitation, no panic, only calculated determination. It was as if each soldier knew they had a place in a larger design, a machine that functioned perfectly no matter the odds. "They're unstoppable," whispered one of the Verelians beside her, his eyes wide with awe and fear. "Yes," Alarin murmured, her antennae twitching thoughtfully. "But why do they fight so hard? What drives them?" Over the next few days, Alarin followed the humans closely, hoping to understand their true motives. She watched them move from battle to battle with relentless focus, taking only the briefest moments to rest between engagements. Every time they encountered Craxil forces, the humans fought without mercy. Plasma fire rained down in relentless waves, and hand-to-hand combat was swift and unforgiving. They took no pleasure in the violence, but neither did they show hesitation. Alarin noticed something else too. The humans were constantly protecting civilians, even at great risk to themselves. They shielded Verelian families with their own bodies, evacuated refugees under heavy fire, and prioritized the wounded, even when it slowed their advance. This behavior puzzled her. The humans didn't act like conquerors or mercenaries. They fought like beings with something far more personal at stake. But what? The uneasy tension between the Verelians and humans deepened after a particularly gruesome victory at the Craxil's main communications hub. The battle left the ground scorched and lifeless, the enemy forces annihilated to the last soldier. As Alarin walked among the rubble, she couldn't help but feel a growing discomfort. The destruction was absolute. No Craxil survivors remained. It was as though the humans had wiped out the enemy without a second thought. Even the Verelian counselors who had begged for help began to murmur among themselves. What kind of beings fought with such single-minded purpose? That night, as the Verelian leaders gathered, Alarin raised the question that had been gnawing at her mind. "What happens when the war is over?" she asked. "Will the humans leave us in peace, or will they turn their weapons on us next?" The counselors exchanged nervous glances, but no one had an answer. The humans had saved them. Yes, but at what cost? Later that night, Alarin ventured into the human camp, drawn by a mixture of fear and curiosity. She wanted to understand, to know why they fought with such cold ferocity. The camp was quiet, the soldiers resting or tending to equipment. Alarin noticed a small group of them gathered around a holographic projector, their expressions unusually soft. They weren't strategizing or planning the next battle. They were watching old recordings, images of Earth, of cities filled with light and life, of families gathered under starry skies. Alarin hesitated at the edge of the camp, unwilling to intrude. But as she stood there, Major Cole approached, his steps heavy but measured. "Can't sleep?" he asked, his voice low. Alarin shook her head. "I have questions," she admitted, "and I don't understand why you do all of this. You fight like monsters, but you protect us like—" She trailed off, unsure how to finish the sentence. "Like family," Cole said quietly, surprising her. They sat in silence for a while, the distant sounds of the battlefield fading into the night. Finally, Alarin gathered the courage to ask what had been on her mind since the humans first arrived. "Why do you fight so hard? Why do you care about us?" Cole leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. His face, illuminated by the glow of the projector, looked weary beyond measure. "We fight," he said slowly, "because we know what it's like to be alone, to have nowhere to run, no one to help." Alarin's antennae twitched. "What do you mean?" Cole exhaled, staring at the distant horizon. "Earth almost didn't survive. We fought wars that nearly wiped us out, and when we were at our lowest, no one came." He glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "We learned the hard way that if we wanted to survive, we had to fight for ourselves." Alarin blinked, the weight of his words sinking in. The humans fought not for conquest, but because they understood what it meant to face extinction. "We're not here to conquer," Cole continued. "We're here because we won't let anyone else go through what we did, not if we can help it." Alarin sat in stunned silence, her mind racing. Everything began to make sense. The humans' ferocity, their relentless campaigns, their refusal to abandon the Verelians, even when victory seemed assured. They weren't fighting for glory or power. They were fighting because they knew what it meant to be left behind. For the first time since the war began, Alarin felt something other than fear toward the humans. She felt gratitude, and something deeper, an understanding of the scars they carried beneath their cold exteriors. "They call you monsters," she said softly, "but I don't think that's true." Cole gave a tired smile, the first she had seen from him. "Monsters don't care if you live or die," he said. "We do." As the night wore on, Alarin sat with Cole and the other soldiers, watching the holograms of Earth. For the first time, she saw the humans not as warriors or predators, but as beings haunted by their own past, beings who fought because they couldn't bear to see another race suffer as they once had. And in that quiet moment, surrounded by the distant sounds of a war still raging, Alarin realized that the humans were not just fighting for survival. They were fighting for something far more profound. They were fighting so that others wouldn't have to. The Craxil forces broke at last. After weeks of relentless battles, the human campaign ended with a decisive blow. The invaders routed from every corner of the Verelian territories. The final skirmish unfolded at dawn, deep within the forests surrounding the capital. The human forces encircled the enemy, cutting off every path of retreat. The Craxil fought to the bitter end, but the humans didn't relent. Plasma cannons roared, drones hovered overhead, and soldiers executed maneuvers with terrifying precision. Every Craxil combatant fell, one by one, until the forest fell silent but for the hum of human equipment and the occasional whispered order. The Verelians watched from the safety of the bunkers, stunned by the sheer efficiency of the human assault. As the last Craxil forces were driven out, the humans regrouped, checking for survivors and consolidating their positions. Victory had come, but there was no celebration, no cheers, no raised banners, no declarations of triumph. The humans moved through the aftermath like shadows, securing the battlefield with grim determination. In the heart of the ruined capital, Verelian civilians emerged cautiously from their shelters. The streets were littered with debris, charred armor, and lifeless Craxil soldiers. Human medics worked quietly among the rubble, treating the wounded, human and Verelian alike. Alarin wandered through the city, her steps slow and uncertain. The war was over, yet she felt no joy, only unease. The humans had won, but they seemed indifferent to victory. She found Major Cole standing on a broken stone bridge, gazing at the smoldering horizon. His armor was dented and scorched from battle, but he carried himself with the same quiet resolve. He looked like a man who had been here before, too many times. Alarin hesitated before speaking. "The Craxil are gone. You saved us." Cole gave a brief nod. "We did what we had to do." His words were matter-of-fact, devoid of pride or satisfaction. There was no sense of accomplishment in his tone, only the weight of responsibility. "Is that all it is to you?" Alarin asked softly. "Just another mission?" Cole's expression remained calm, but his eyes betrayed a deep weariness. "We don't fight to win. We fight to stop others from losing." As the human soldiers collected their fallen, Alarin noticed a strange reverence in their actions. They carried the bodies of their comrades with care, speaking quietly among themselves as they prepared to return them home. There were no grand ceremonies, only silent gestures of respect. She saw a human medic sit beside a wounded Verelian child, murmuring soft words of comfort as he bandaged the boy's wounds. Another soldier knelt by a fallen comrade, placing a small insignia on his chest before standing to rejoin the others. Alarin approached the medic, curiosity burning inside her. Why do you fight like this? Why go so far for people you don't know? The medic looked up, his eyes tired but kind. Because it matters, he said simply. Every life we save matters. Later, Allerin gathered with the Verelian counselors to discuss the aftermath of the war. Relief mingled with uncertainty as they debated the future. They saved us, one counselor whispered. But at what cost? What will they demand in return? They haven't asked for anything, another replied. Perhaps they don't want anything. Allerin shook her head. She knew the humans too well by now. They didn't fight for resources or territory. They fought because they believed they had to, because they understood the stakes in a way that no other species did. Still, the counselors remained uneasy. The humans were an enigma, their motivations difficult to comprehend. They feared what might happen if the humans decided to stay, or if they chose to leave. Determined to find answers, Allerin sought out Major Cole once more. She found him near the edge of the city, standing beside a dropship as his soldiers prepared to depart. The war was over, and the humans were leaving without fanfare. Is that it? Allerin asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. You're just leaving? Cole nodded. Our mission is complete. No demands, no rewards. Why? For the first time, Cole's expression softened. He removed his helmet, revealing a face lined with exhaustion, and something deeper, a quiet sadness, as though the battle had taken more than just energy. We didn't come here for rewards, he said quietly. We came because you needed help. Allerin's antennae twitched, her mind racing. It still didn't make sense. No species fought this hard without expecting something in return. But why? Why risk your lives for us? Cole's gaze met hers, and his next words cut through the silence like a blade. Because we know what it's like to stand alone. Allerin felt her heart tighten. In that moment she understood humanity's ferocity, their relentless determination. It wasn't born from a love of war. It came from pain, from the memory of battles they had fought alone, with no one to save them. The humans fought because they knew the cost of being abandoned. They fought because they refused to let anyone else face that fate. Allerin blinked back tears, overwhelmed by the weight of the revelation. She saw the humans not as monsters but as survivors, beings scarred by their own losses, determined to spare others from the same fate. You saved us, she whispered, and we never even thanked you. Cole gave a small, weary smile. We don't do it for thanks. With that, he placed his helmet back on, sealing away the emotion in his eyes. Take care of your people, he said softly. That's all the thanks we need. As the human ships lifted off into the sky, the Verelians watched in silence, their hearts filled with a strange mix of gratitude and sorrow. They had been saved by the most feared warriors in the galaxy, not out of conquest, but out of empathy. The humans fought not because they wanted to, but because they knew what it was like to be left behind. And as the human fleet vanished into the stars, Allerin knew that the Verelians would carry this lesson with them forever. They had witnessed humanity's strength, not just in battle but in compassion. The skies over the Verelian capital were clear for the first time in weeks. The smoke of battle finally lifted. The sounds of war had faded into silence, leaving only the ruins of a once thriving civilization and the strange stillness that followed victory. Allerin stood atop a broken tower, watching as the last of the human warships vanished into the stars, streaking across the sky like falling comets. The wind carried the faint smell of ash, but beneath it, she could sense the first hints of renewal, a promise of life returning to a world on the edge of extinction. The humans were gone, leaving no trace of their presence beyond the lives they had saved and the memories they had etched into Verelian hearts. They had come as warriors, but left as something far more complicated, guardians perhaps, or even friends. In the following days, the Verelians began the long and painful process of rebuilding. The damage was immense. Entire cities reduced to rubble, families torn apart, and a culture that had thrived on peace forced to confront the harsh realities of war. But they were alive, and that, Allerin knew, was because of the humans. She watched as Verelian engineers cleared debris from the streets, tending to the wounded and beginning the slow process of reconstruction. And as they rebuilt their world, they carried with them the lessons learned from the strange visitors who had saved them. In the heart of the capital, Allerin met with the remaining members of the Verelian Council. The elders, once fearful and uncertain, now spoke with a newfound clarity, their voices steady as they discussed the future. We owe our lives to the humans, one counselor said, his gaze distant, and yet we know so little about them. They did not seek power or wealth, another added. What kind of beings fight so fiercely, only to leave without asking for anything in return? Allerin smiled faintly. She understood now, more than the others did. They fought because they remembered what it was like to be abandoned, she said quietly. They fought because they believe no one should face extinction alone. The counselors exchanged glances, nodding slowly as the weight of her words settled over them. It was a lesson they would never forget. In the weeks that followed, Alarin visited the places where the humans had fought. Battlefields turned quiet monuments to their sacrifice. She walked among the ruins, tracing the paths where soldiers had stood shoulder to shoulder, facing impossible odds, not for conquest, but for compassion. One day, she came upon a small memorial left behind by the human soldiers. It was simple, a broken helmet resting atop a stack of stones, with a human inscription carved into the base. The words were brief, but powerful, for those who could not fight and those who fought for them. Alarin knelt beside the memorial, her fingers brushing the worn surface of the inscription. It was a message not just to the Verelians, but to anyone who found it, a reminder of the humans' legacy, not in the battles they fought, but in the lives they saved. One evening, as the stars filled the sky once more, Alarin stood on the edge of the rebuilt city, looking up at the constellations above. Somewhere out there, she knew, the humans were still fighting, not for conquest, but for the simple belief that no one should be left to face annihilation alone. Her thoughts drifted to Major Cole, the weary commander who had fought so fiercely, yet carried the weight of every battle like a silent burden. She wondered if he and his soldiers had ever found the peace they sought, if they ever would. And in that quiet moment, she whispered a promise to the stars. We won't forget. The Verelians would carry the memory of the humans with them always, not just as warriors but as beings who had fought because they understood what it meant to lose everything, and who refused to let another race share that fate. Months later, as the Verelian world began to bloom again, a small, unexpected message arrived from deep space. It was brief and untraceable, sent from an unknown location. One final message from the humans. You're not alone. Alarin smiled as she read the words, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. It was a simple message, but it meant everything. The humans had left, but their legacy remained, not just in the ruins of the battles they fought, but in the hearts they had touched. And though the galaxy might still see humanity as dangerous, the Verelians knew the truth. Beneath their fierce exteriors, the humans were driven by something deeper than war, a quiet, relentless compassion born from their own pain. As the Verelian cities rose from the ashes, so too did the bond between their people and humanity. The Verelians had learned a powerful truth. Strength was not only found in weapons or armies, but in the courage to stand together, even in the face of annihilation. And somewhere across the vast expanse of the galaxy, the humans continued their journey, fighting for those who could not fight for themselves. They would never seek glory or recognition. They only fought to give others the chance to live. And if the time came again, when the darkness returned and the innocent cried out for help, the Verelians knew one thing with absolute certainty: the humans would answer.